Hello, football fans. Jason Andera, Midco Sports, alongside Michael McCleary, Argus Leader Media, and we're another week into the season, and I've got my first long sleeve. I'm pulling the long sleeves out. We're getting close to October here. I feel like we've learned enough to push forward into the second half of the season here, Michael.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely clothes are changing a little bit on the sidelines. I probably should have worn a thicker shirt when I was out there last Friday.
A little rain today.
But yeah, I mean, everything's shaping up. It's we learn a little bit more every single week, and it's getting more exciting by the day.
We learn a little bit more, and then we're puzzled a little bit more. Last week, I was puzzled by 11 AAA a little bit, and let's start with Harrisburg in their third consecutive game of playing right alongside their opponent, and it's been a Sioux Falls public school every week. Lincoln a couple weeks ago played within one score, went to double overtime with Washington the week after that, and then last week it takes some last-minute miracles for Harrisburg to pull one out against Roosevelt. What's your reaction to that game?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to some people around Roosevelt, and obviously Harrisburg has shown some vulnerabilities over the past couple of weeks, and they knew that they could beat them with the run game. So, they went to the run game pretty often early, and they kept with it to the end of the game. I mean, they ended up allowing over 600 yards of offense, yet they still were in this game, and they still had a chance to win this game if not for that last play that put them over 600. But
and in that last play, I mean, just a breakdown in communication, and of course, Lincoln Carlson and Jacob Knuth are going to take advantage of that every time.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the one guy that you're not supposed to leave open on their defense. You're probably worried about the run play, but with under a minute left in the game, I mean, you gotta have to know that they're past. They have to go the length of the field. So, that was not a good defensive stand by Roosevelt, and definitely makes that game a tough pill to swallow.
How about that fourth down that Harrisburg goes for it, tries to seal the game, and then Roosevelt somehow comes out of that pile and takes the touchdown back. I don't know if there's a good angle that you saw, but it looked like the play was totally stalled, and the next thing you know, Roosevelt comes out with the touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, Harrisburg didn't help their case in a lot of different scenarios of this game. Yeah, a ton of turnovers. I mean, Roosevelt played a good game, and you can't really take that away from them. Obviously, other than that last play, but Harrisburg, over the past couple weeks, they've just showed that, people are sort of starting to figure them out a little bit. I mean, they're still a really good team, as evidenced by, the fact that they're still undefeated.
Yeah.
But, they definitely made quite a few mistakes in that Roosevelt game that, helped the Rough Riders stick in it.
All right, Washington played Brandon Valley. We have another undefeated team in this class, and it's Brandon Valley. Once again, they put up 2 touchdowns, only one on offense, and get the W, and they're fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, how easy is it to play offense on Brandon Valley? I mean, you don't really have to do much, right? Like, you just get exactly what you need.
Sometimes a game and take care of the ball. Don't turn it over.
And obviously, I'm kidding. Not anybody can do it. They're playing within their game plan, and they're doing a good job at it. But it's pretty remarkable how they keep on pulling out these wins. I mean, the offense isn't performing badly. It's just doing what it needs to do.
Right.
And the defense, I mean, it's getting to a point where, they're playing a bunch of teams with 10 points, 12 points. I mean, who can argue against Brandon Valley being the best defense in AAA? It's really
I think
almost
the only other
impossible to
argument
do.
Coming in might have been Washington, because they've been playing so well, and they did a pretty good job holding Brandon to just one offensive touchdown, but you got to do better than that when you play against the Lynx.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be less than 2 touchdown game. I mean, it was only a 2 touchdown performance, but then they got that extra field goal. But if you're only going to score 10 points against Brandon Valley, I mean, you got to think about not letting them score any points at all. So, it's going to be really hard to beat Brandon Valley, because immediately once they get into the end zone, you're going to have to start sweating, because how many points are you going to be able to score more than that one time that they got into the end zone?
So we have 2 undefeated teams in 11 AAA. Neither of them overpowering at this point. It makes for a really fun schedule. Here's a look at this week's games. Tonight, Brookings takes on Washington. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. A really hot team in 11 AA taking on, one of the contenders in 11 AAA who really haven't worked in their record. Then we've got Harrisburg, who's at Stevens. Lincoln is at Brandon Valley. They get their turn to try to knock off the Lynx. and Roosevelt at Jefferson, a first homecoming ever for Jefferson. Let's start with tonight's game, Brookings at Washington. Big game for both of these teams.
Yeah, I mean, if Brookings can pull out this win, that's just enormous for them. But, Washington's looking to get back on track. I mean, they were really trending upward pretty fast.
They really were.
Prior
Two
to
tough
this
losses
game.
to two undefeated teams in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, so, they're getting to, I guess, a softer part of their schedule right now where they could, I guess, probably get back on their feet a little bit, but this Brookings team is not going to let them down easy. I mean, this is a really, really good team, and AA, based on the teams at the top of this class, is really not that far off from some of those teams in AAA.
I totally agree. I think Brookings, especially after they shook off that first game that they played against T, they've been right there as one of the best, if not the best team in 11 AA. They get their biggest tests of the season tonight. Not out of the question that they could play right alongside and maybe get a road win here, which would be really tough. But it's going to be a challenge for sure.
Yeah, and I remember a couple weeks ago, we were talking about that Watertown-Lincoln game where Watertown took Lincoln right down to the wire, and Lincoln is a 4-1 team, top 5 in AAA, and T Area, who's at the top of AA, just absolutely destroyed Watertown the other day. So that really tells you a lot about what that upper echelon actually is like in AA. I mean, it's a class that maybe you put T Area, maybe you put maybe you put Pierre, and maybe you put Brookings in AAA, and maybe they're competing.
It's so hard to figure out this year because you do some of that. These guys played these guys rule, and Pierre played Harrisburg early on and started out okay, played with them, and then Harrisburg pulled away. I mean, you really don't know what to expect. That's what I've found so far. But you're right. In a game like this, either way, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised with any result in this one. Harrisburg, I said, is at Stevens. So Stevens hasn't had a real convincing victory. Last week they beat Sturgis, but it's going to be tough with their work cut out for them this week going against Harrisburg. Lincoln at Brandon Valley. You talked about it. Lincoln, just a one-loss team. They had a good showing against O'Gorman last week. Yeah,
great defensive team. And obviously Tate Schaefer gets better every single week.
Mm-hmm.
They got a really, really good core, and I don't know if they're really quite there with those top 3 teams in AAA, but they're a team that's going to cause any team that they go up against problems. And O'Gorman hasn't had the best start to the season, so I think that's a game that entering what is probably Lincoln's toughest stretch of the season. They, a lot of people probably assumed, coming into the season those first 5 games were going to be, a little bit softer part of the schedule. Obviously, Stephen was better than they expected. Watertown played them close. But Lincoln's coming into this game and they're looking to cause havoc as they do always. And that's something that I feel like they'll have a good chance of doing against O'Gorman.
Yeah, don't be surprised either way on this game either. Brandon always plays better at home, but Lincoln brings a lot of firepower. And then the game that we have on Midco, Roosevelt at Jefferson. And, I think if you would have played this game a month ago, there had been a lot more fire between these two schools. I think that subsided a little bit. These guys know each other well, but you know what? It's just a really good football game to talk about on the field. And Roosevelt taking on Jefferson. It should be a lot of fun out at Howard Wood Field on Friday.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's great players on both sides of the ball. Obviously, Roosevelt was coming off probably a game that they feel like they should have won. So, how they respond off of that, it's still yet to be seen. You don't know if they're coming into the game down about the loss or they're just coming energized that they played with the number 1 team in AAA. But this is a turning point for really both teams. I mean, Jefferson, I think they've proved that they deserve to be among the upper echelon of AAA, but they want to stay at that spot.
Right.
Whereas Roosevelt really needs to, get some recovering going, start to turn their season around a little bit. So this is the center game of the season where it really determines what path these teams are going to take for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think this Roosevelt team has showed a lot. I really am impressed with what Jackson Brower has brought to the quarterback position at Roosevelt. Really staying in his lane, doing his thing, but making big plays as well. And then Nelson Wright has run for over 100 yards now 2 weeks in a row, and I would fully expect this Roosevelt team to show off that offensive line and just try to dominate this game physically, keep the ball as long as possible so they can keep it out of Talon Ashley's hands. I think that's really a key to the game for Roosevelt.
Yeah, and if they are unable to do that, I think this is going to be a pretty high-scoring game. Yeah. And, you know, it's sort of...
Yeah, it could be just like last week, too, where if there's some turnovers, there's field position problems, this thing could blow up into another 60, 70-point game.
Yeah, and if this becomes a shootout, I mean, who knows who's going to take the game? I mean, it's sort of just, you know, whoever, like the Harrisburg game, whoever scores last.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so this could be really exciting for, you know, multiple reasons. Either, you know, Roosevelt, like, controls the game for the first time this season, and, you know, that's just sort of an exciting development for the rest of Roosevelt's season and how the AAA playoffs are going to be able to shake out. Or this could just be a high-scoring shootout where, you know, we get to see some of the best players on both sides of the ball, you know, just show what they could do.
Really excited to see how this one unfolds. 5 o'clock on Friday night. You can catch that on Midco and Midco Sports Plus. 11 AA football. We talked about Brookings playing a little bit. They're one of the hottest teams. They play a AAA team, but the AA schedule looks like this. Huron is at Pierre, Yankton at Mitchell, Aberdeen at Washington, always a good rivalry, and T area takes on Douglas. Douglas not off to a good start. You watched T last week. Tell me some impressions of the Titans.
Yeah, I mean, their running game is unbelievable. You know, Watertown tried to get them with the passing play early in the game. They actually succeeded where, you know, they their quarterback hit their wide receiver for, I believe it was Cole Holden.
Yeah. Cole Holden's their leading receiver,
So Drew Norberg, who's Watertown quarterback, they got pinned at the 2-yard line at one point, and the very next play, Cole Holden went deep down the sideline, and he got it right out there, and they kept on trying that deep play. So it seemed like they had a good connection early on. T maybe didn't come out as quickly as they wanted to. So it seemed like the game was going to be a pretty good game, and then T just, you know, after the first quarter, it wasn't even close.
Yeah.
You know, T is a really, really good run game. Their defense was able to completely shut down Watertown. I mean, this is a legitimate top team in AA. We talk about their early schedule and how maybe Pierre had a couple tests that T hasn't had, but, you know, when you look at T's product on the field, I mean, it's impossible to bet against them. They're so electric in the run game, and they defend incredibly well, even if their slow start is something that they want to work on.
Right, and you know, T does not have Pierre on the schedule, which to me would be one of the most interesting games, and we might see that one at the end of the year. Speaking of Pierre, they take on Huron. Huron, a team that's kind of been lurking in the background and got a nice win last week with a little bit of an upset, and they go to Pierre this week to play. I think that would be an important game if Huron's able to play with them and show that maybe they can be part of this mix. Yankton's been playing well, but against some really tough competition the last couple of weeks. And then Aberdeen now has been down for a couple of weeks. They lost a couple of weeks ago with a tough game in Brookings, and then Huron they had problems with. Now they get Watertown. I think both of these two teams are back on their heels a little bit. This is an important game for both teams.
Yeah, and, you know, I was extremely high on Aberdeen a couple weeks ago before they picked up their first loss. They were, you know, one of the only undefeated teams left, and, you know, it was...
They felt like they belonged in that top echelon, but a couple steps back.
Yeah, and, you know, before those two losses, I mean, you know, Sam Rolfs looked like maybe the best quarterback in that class. So, you know, it's been, you know, I guess a down couple weeks for them. These are opponents coming into the week that they probably should have thought that they would have beat. I don't know. I mean, the first Brookings game, like, Brookings has always been sort of rising up and a tough opponent. But, you know, this Huron game was a bit of a surprise. But, you know, Watertown obviously showed something against T, at least in that first quarter. And I think Aberdeen Central's still a good team. So this is a really close matchup, and I really think it's gonna, you know, be a good game.
It's going to be huge. 3-2 Aberdeen taking on 2-3 Watertown, but we know Watertown can play some football, so a big game for both of those teams. Let's move to 11A, where we had a 1 versus 2 battle. We had some Canton at Madison. They played last year. Canton came out on top. Madison was a half a step behind. I think Madison's fully caught up right now. And the score went all towards Madison, but the game was fairly close throughout. Really, the difference is you got two physical teams. Madison made some plays in the passing game, and they shut down the big plays from Canton, and that ended up being the difference. Right now, they're the number one team. Are you buying into Madison at number one?
Yeah, I think you have to, especially at this point of the season. 1-2, as we sort of talk about with T and Pierre, it's in the playoffs. It's really not going to make that much of a difference.
Right.
These are two top-ranked teams that are going to be, whoever team is scheduled against them in the playoffs, they're going to be
in trouble.
Scared. Yeah. Maybe not scared because nobody would admit that, but
right.
It's that's a tough test for pretty much anybody. But at this point, the head-to-head matchup probably decides all. But it's really going to be interesting how these teams kind of respond off of this game, and whether Madison keeps their strong streak or Canton just recovers.
Speaking of responding off of this game, Canton goes back home and they take on West Central, a team that would like to make that jump into maybe the top two, and they have an opportunity here to do just that. They have just one loss in the season. Last year they played twice, once in the playoffs, once in the regular season. West Central got them both times. Canton would love to get some revenge in this game, but two really good teams going at it here in 11A.
Yeah, two 4-1 teams. There's a lot of 4-1 teams in that class. It's going to be real interesting over the course of the next couple games because a lot of these teams that are sort of in that 1 through 4 range are pretty close.
Right.
So a lot of these next results are really going to determine how that shakes out.
Yeah, we know it's going to be a physical game, and West Central's been able to throw the ball a little bit more than they used to. With Gavin Cook throwing the ball, and Braden Derricks has been unbelievable in the passing game. So their big play ability, I think, gives them a similar advantage to what Madison had last week. But Canton on their home field, I tell you what, Peyton Eben has been really good on this team, and he leads a strong bunch of guys up there. I still think they're the favorites in this game. But do not be surprised to have one come down to the end in that one. Vermilion takes on Del Rapids. Lennox at Sioux Falls Christian, a couple teams that have tempered their wins lately that need to get back on track. And then we talk about Madison. They visit Tri-Valley, never an easy place to play either. Any comments on any of those games that you're looking forward to in 11A?
Yeah, I think that Lennox Sioux Falls Christian game is going to be pretty good too. In sort of like a different way that a lot of these other teams that are sort of rising are coming up against each other. These are two teams that really need to kind of recover and get themselves back on track. I was extremely high on Sioux Falls Christian towards the beginning of the year. They were playing really well on offense, and their defense was they had some things to fix, but they were scoring so much it really didn't matter. But now it's getting to the point where I feel like they're a little bit discombobulated, but they'll get back to it, and I think they're a good team.
This Lennox offense is a lot of fun to watch, so I think this one could be a pinball game back and forth. Braden Wolf has had an excellent year for Lennox, and if you haven't had a chance to watch Stephen Christian, the receiver at Lennox, take some time. He is a fun to watch, great yards after catch guy, and he gets open in the passing game as well. So I think that one's definitely worth taking a look at if you're looking for a game to check out on Friday night. Lennox at Sioux Falls Christian. 11B, we talk about it every week, that winner, this is winner's class, but they've got one more test this year, and this week they get Woonsocket, Wessington Springs, Sanborn Central, who comes in with just the one loss. The one thing I can say is this Blackhawk team the last 2 weeks has had Quentin Christensen back, the SDSU recruit, up front, and he's played some receiver, some tight end, some D-line, some linebacker, a bunch of different positions. Right now he's just up front playing offensive line, which is what he'll do at SDSU. But the last 2 weeks, they've had almost 250 yards rushing from Clay Olinger both weeks. I think they're a team that Winter can't look past. This is going to be a test, but we both think Winter is really the class of this class.
Yeah, this certainly is a test, and you don't want to, in saying how good Winter is, talk down on Woonsocket, but Winter hasn't necessarily really. There's no reason for us to doubt that Winter is going to run away with pretty much every single game they play this year. They're just so unbelievably good. But Woonsocket, even if they don't get this one, they're going to be a good team for the rest of the year. So
I agree. I think they've got a strong senior class, and That's a team in the playoffs that, if they don't run into winter, could find their way back to the Dome. Speaking of that, though, there's so many one-loss teams. We've talked about this before in 11B. You got winter, but then who? This week we're going to spell it out. We've got a ton of one-loss teams. Groton, their only loss was the opening game to Clark Willow Lake. Hot Springs' only loss to St. Thomas More. Roncalli's only loss coming last week to Groton. Bridgewater Emory Ethan's only loss coming to Winter, where they got spanked, but they've had a couple quality wins as well. Elk Point Jefferson's loss came to McCook Central Montrose. McCook Central Montrose has now lost 2 games. Mount Vernon Plankinton's only loss to Winter. Sioux Valley's only lost to Bridgewater Emory Ethan, and then Woonsock that we talked about, their team's loss, they only came to Sioux Valley. So these teams kind of beating up on each other a little bit. Is there anybody who kind of bubbles up to the top for you out of that group?
Yeah, I actually ranked Groton area in my top 5 this week because, I think, Aberdeen Roncalli's been in the top. They haven't
lost since the beginning of the year.
Yeah, and Aberdeen Roncalli's been in the top 5 for the past couple weeks, and they just beat them last week. And it was, it was a pretty convincing win for Groton area as well. So, I think they proved that they're a team that at least belongs in that ranked side of the 4-1 teams. There's so many 4-1 teams, you can't even put all of them in the top 5. So, it's sort of one of those classes where, you go by strength of schedule and, quality wins and stuff like that. And
it just gets you lost because you start saying these guys beat them, but these guys beat them, but these, I agree. And if you play that game, honestly, you look at Mount Vernon Plankinton, and I wonder why they're not getting any love. They played Winter as close as anybody this year, stayed in the game with them, which no one else can make that claim. That's their only loss of the season. They've been playing really well other than that, but yet they're not getting any love in the rankings. So those of you who are doing the voting out there, take a look at that Mount Vernon Plankinton schedule and join me in maybe getting them back up the rankings a little bit. I just feel like they're one of the top 5 teams in the class. So that's my little speech. This week's games, we got Elk Point and Jefferson taking on Sioux Valley, a couple one-loss teams. Sioux Valley continues to put the ball in the end zone, and they keep playing tough teams, and they keep finding a way to win those games. So they're a team that's on a roll. And then we talked about it, Winter at Woonsock at Wessington Springs, Sanborn Central. All right, 9-man football. 9A is pretty good. We've got 3 teams in 9A that are still unbeaten. We can't say that about many of the classes right now, and they continue to win big. Harriet-Selby area, actually, they've had the toughest strength of schedule. They are 4-0 against teams over 500. So out of those 9A teams who haven't lost, we're talking about DeSmet, Howard, and Harriet-Selby. I think they've got the toughest schedule, actually, which a lot of people look at HSA and say, well, who'd they played? They played a really good schedule, and they've won all those games. Howard, on the other hand, maybe some of the biggest wins overall against some of those top-tier teams. They've got Garrettson and Hanson still coming up on the schedule. They're going to have to prove the most over this last part of their season to say that they belong at the top of 9A. And then you got DeSmet. 5 straight shutouts for this team, and they get Castlewood coming up.
That's an unbelievable stat. That's to keep a team completely off the scoreboard, for 5 straight games is that's just unreal.
I mean, we knew they were good when they started out the season with a good win, and not a totally dominating win, but a good win against Woolsey Wessington.
No, yeah, and it sort of, I think it underscores how good Woolsey Wessington is because they've played well over the course of the last couple games. But for them to be the only team that scored against them this year, that's just unreal. I mean, we knew that their offensive players were going to play well, and obviously a lot of those players play on both sides of the ball. But it's the shutout thing is something that I don't think I'll ever get over. And if that continues for the rest of the season, I mean, it's hard not to put them as the most dominant team in that entire class of football.
They play the schedule that's in front of them, and they have been absolutely dominating that schedule. And I think that's why between that and that initial win over Woolsey Wessington, that makes them number 1 in 9A. But I just want to reiterate, 9A is really good. A lot of good teams in that class. I think the most important game this week in 9AA, we got Hanson at Chester. And Chester, they've been my dogs all season long. I really like this Flyer team. And they played well against Howard as well as anybody's played against Howard. Didn't get that win, but they impressed Howard with how physical that they can play. And tonight, it's time to put up or shut up. Or Friday night, they play Hanson, the team that's not lost yet in 9AA. But to me, I think this Chester team has a chance to knock off number one. It could be a lot of fun to see how these two teams do and if they meet again coming down the road in the playoffs. So Hanson-Chester is my game of the week in 9-man football. Let us know what you think about that. Our question and answer this week comes from Ben Jennings. If you had to rank the top 5 in all of 9-man, so including 9AA, 9A, and 9B, who would it be? Who's your top team if you have to rank all the 9-man classes together?
Yeah, I actually made this declaration a couple weeks ago in my What We Learned column every single Monday that I write for Argus Leader. I think DeSmet is the best team in 9-man football. I mean, that was before I even learned about this 5 shutout stat, which is one of the more impressive stats that I've seen. But yeah, I mean, they're obviously they're playmakers with Colt Wilkinson and Kalen Gary. I mean, that's
Red Ostis had a huge week last week as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and when I saw him in week 1, he was sort of like a possession receiver a little bit too, where he didn't obviously pop off the field as much as Kalen Gary did.
But they're literally double teaming Kalen every week, and they've got plenty of athletes.
And they got other options, and Wilkinson can get it out to pretty much anybody. He's a really good passer, especially for 9-man football. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, with all those offensive options, I guess sort of the reason why I, a couple weeks ago, picked them as the number 1 team in the class. With them not allowing any teams to score, I mean, that just only
makes it tough to win.
Only encourages me to go deeper into that declaration.
I have to agree. I think DeSmet's probably your top team, but you ask for the top 5. I'm going to give you more than 5. I think I have about 9 here. So I think we got DeSmet as the top team in 9-man football. I think Howard is very close and right behind them. In fact, for a week, I think I switched them in the polls, but I switched it back to DeSmet because they've been on such a defensive role. I think the third best team right now is Hanson. That could change as they play Chester area. I think Harriet Selby is at number 4 right now, so 3 of the top 4 teams I think are 9A. And then I think Chester area, even with that loss to Howard, I think they belong in the top 5. They're just really physical, and they've got one of the most electric players in the class in Stratton Eppard. Check out his stats. He's over 200 yards rushing almost every week, over 200 yards passing almost every week. And then I think you can't forget about Platt Geddes. They had that slip up against Parkston, but have been really good other than that. I think Wall, they're still undefeated. I know their schedule hasn't really given them an opportunity to be mentioned with some of the best, but I think Wall is a really good team. Florence Henry, another undefeated team that we forget about. Ashton Hansen has been absolutely dominating on the ground for them this year. Then I think you finally get to a 9B team with Avon. It's hard to put a 9B team up in the top 5 for me. There just hasn't been the quality of competition in 9B, but they've won every game that they've stepped up to. And then I think you still have to include on any top list of 9-man teams, you have to put Wolsey-Wessington in there. I know they're a 2-loss team, but those 2 losses were the best game anybody's played against the number 1 team in DeSmet, and they lost to Platt Geddes, but gave them a run for their money last week. So there's my look at 9-man football. I don't know if you have any final comments on 9-man football to add, but that's what I got. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you mentioned Avon. Avon, they're the new number 1 in 9B, and obviously to be a number 1 in any class, I mean, I think you deserve a spot in those rankings. But I agree with you on Wolsey-Wessington, even though they're a 2-loss team. I mean, I don't think, because I think they're going to be there till the very end with 9A. I think they're, so far they're really the only team that's proven that they could go against the number 1 team in the class. And in the playoffs, maybe they'll be able to get a chance to do that. They've made a change. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago at quarterback. They had Marty Gone start at quarterback this year. They put him back to running back where he had so much success last year. And so now with Eric Klanchnik and Marty Gone running the ball and making plays in the passing game, I feel like they have some ability. They got more ceiling to rise up. So thanks for the question, and make sure every week you can always ask us questions, and we'll pick one of those and mention at the end of Football Insiders every week. What are you covering this week, Michael? Argus Leader's always over some of the big games in the area. What do you guys have this week?
Yeah, so we got a lot of really good games this week. We're at 4 different games this weekend. Starting tonight, we got
the Brookings Washington.
The Brookings Washington. So our college sports writer Matt Zimmer is going to be there. Then tomorrow night we got a 3-game night where I'm going to be over at Jefferson Roosevelt. Obviously that's a big game for both of those teams, and there's a lot of familiarity between both of these programs.
A lot of interest in that game too.
Yeah, and then we're going to be over at Cannon West Central, which is a great matchup in 11A. And then Lincoln Brandon Valley, which is probably 2 of the better defenses in AAA, and that's going to be a really good game where probably going to be low scoring, but maybe Lincoln that plays into their game plan because you need it to be low scoring against Brandon Valley.
That's exactly right. I think those are all going to be fantastic games. Check out Michael and the coverage from Argus Leader Media on all those games. Midco, we've got a 5 o'clock start between Jefferson, their first homecoming game ever, which is strange. You have a homecoming game for nobody to come home to. But it'll be a homecoming game for Jefferson against Roosevelt. I'm really looking forward to calling that one with Coach Riggs. And then we'll have Varsity Sports Live coming up at 10:30 with all the highlights from the big games around the area. We'll be back to a full show this week. Last week we had an abbreviated version because we had the late Rushmore Bowl start. So we're looking forward to getting you all those highlights. For Michael McCleary, I'm Jason Andera of Midco Sports. Thanks for watching another episode of Football Insiders. See you next week.